Gas prices are climbing. So is the price of food and just about everything else. Everyone's talking about inflation. Even the comedians on Saturday Night Live.
Inflation is our friend. For example, consider this. In the year 2000, if current trends continue, the average blue-collar annual wage in this country will be $568,000.
But inflation is no joke. In one way or another, almost everyone is affected.
I really hate it because you pay so much for so little.
This is NBC Nightly News.
To most Americans, inflation is public enemy number one.
Good evening. Prices in the United States during the first 3 months of 1979 went up at an annual rate of 13%.
So while Magic Johnson was winning a national championship, Paul Volcker was worried about inflation.
You cannot build economic growth, you cannot build prosperity, you can't build full employment on a currency that is inflating, a currency that people don't have some confidence in.
In 1979, Volcker was appointed chairman of the Federal Reserve Board of Governors. The Fed tries to avoid inflation because it causes many problems. Businesses don't know where prices are headed and can't plan for the future. Individuals tend to spend their money faster before it loses even more value. And they tend to save less.
If you're going to build more factories, if you're going to buy some machines, you have to have some savings. But there's no incentive to save. If you see your savings going up in smoke, so to speak, because prices are rising. What's the use of saving $10 this year if it's going to cost you $15 next year for what you didn't buy this year?
One fear was that inflation could spiral into hyperinflation, as it had in Argentina when the government kept printing more and more currency. At one point, Argentina's inflation got so out of control that consumers rioted against rising prices. So in 1979, the Fed was forced to take strong action.
Inflation can only persist with big growth in the money supply that feeds and supports the inflationary process. So what the Federal Reserve does, fundamentally, is control the money supply. And we finally reached a point where we said, look, we're just not going to permit an increase in money supply to support this inflation.
That sounds easy. Just issue less money. But there's more to it. First off, money isn't just this green stuff. Paper currency and coins make up less than a third of all the money in circulation. Money also includes all the deposits we hold in checking accounts. These are simply electronic entries that exist on a bank's computer. But they're money just the same. Basically, anything you can spend, whether by writing a check or taking out your wallet, is defined as money. The Fed can adjust the money supply by injecting money into the system electronically or by withdrawing money from the economy. Think of it. The Federal Reserve has the ability to create money and make it disappear. What's most important is what happens as a result. Anytime the supply of money is altered, the effects are felt throughout the economy. If the money supply is growing rapidly, interest rates tend to go down, at least in the short run. It's a simple matter of supply and demand. When banks have more money available to lend, they don't charge as much interest. In turn, lower interest rates encourage consumers to borrow money. And when people have more money, they're usually willing to spend more for products. Prices tend to go up. That means inflation and all the problems that come with it. Now look at the other side of it. When there's too little money around, the scarcity of money means people will have to pay more to borrow it. Interest rates tend to go up. Because borrowing is more expensive, consumers are less likely to take out loans. In general, people have fewer dollars to buy things with, and businesses can't raise their prices. Over time, inflation tends to slow down or stop altogether. That's the power of monetary policy. So when inflation gets out of hand, the Fed tries to slow the growth of the money supply. But as you saw, that can mean higher interest rates, at least in the short term. which brings us back to our story.
It's December 1980. There's the launching of a new cable channel. It's called Music Television, MTV. At the same time, the spaceship Voyager sends back pictures of the planet Saturn. Meanwhile, the U.S. economy is still in trouble.
The prime lending rate went to 21.5% today. Before this week, it had never in American history been above 20.
The Fed has restricted the growth of the money supply, and interest rates are rising rapidly. One effect, fewer people can afford to borrow money to buy a new car.
The price of the car is bad enough, but the interest rate is ridiculous.
High interest rates also mean fewer people can buy new homes. As a result, the housing industry is in the pits. The Fed governors receive hundreds of 2x4s in the mail, a symbol of protest from the construction industry. Meanwhile, there's a demonstration outside the Federal Reserve building in Washington. The Fed, and especially Chairman Paul Volcker, are under attack.
There was a cement company that used to put ads, full-page ads in the Wall Street Journal, skull and crossbones under my name or under my picture or whatever. And it kind of rankled a bit, but I do think there was a feeling in the country then that there was something of an emergency that had to be dealt with. It had to be dealt with by forceful action and a kind of common sense reaction that there would be a little pain in the process. And that's what got you through.
It's October 1982. The Space Shuttle Columbia takes off for an important mission. It will release a satellite into permanent orbit. Back on Earth, the latest rage is called breakdancing. Meanwhile, inflation and high interest rates have taken their toll on the economy. Companies are borrowing less and investing in fewer new plants, and existing plants are being shut down. Nancy Teeters was sworn in as a governor of the Federal Reserve Board just as inflation was picking up steam.
Once you begin to decrease the rate of real growth, you begin to cause the rate of unemployment to rise, and you know that. And that's why it's a difficult decision to make. I mean, it's the sort of thing that wakes you up and you worry about it at 3 o'clock in the morning, because real people are getting hurt.
Rising unemployment has one side effect. Because people have less money to spend, businesses can't raise prices as quickly. One eventual result? Lower inflation.
The inflation numbers for 1983 came out, and they were the lowest that they have been since 1971-72. 3.8%. That's down from more than 12% in 1980.
July 1984. The new fashion? Torn sweatshirts inspired by the movie Flashdance. Meanwhile, Americans are going back to work, and the unemployment rate is falling fast.
In May, the rate stood at 7.5%. Today, the June rate was announced, and it's a big drop to 7.1%.
At the same time, inflation seems under control. Prices, which were going up at more than 13% a year, are rising at 4%. The fight against inflation has apparently been won.
Once we got the inflation rate down, we had the longest expansion in peacetime in recorded American history. So instead of kind of stumbling from one recession to another, I think it is true in a broad sense that we laid the basis for a long period of expansion.
Of course, the Fed doesn't have absolute control over the nation's economy, just the monetary policy side of the equation. The President and Congress manage fiscal policy, decisions about taxing and governmental spending that also have major effects on economic performance. Still, the Fed has a huge influence on matters like inflation and interest rates, things that affect all our lives. The Fed's methods have changed over time to take advantage of the latest computers and electronics, but its mission remains the same: to aim for stable prices, full employment, and a growing economy. I'm Bobby Rivers. Thanks for watching.